Okay, so we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Ken here. Ken, you're somebody that's an expert in CX, and CX is so important because if you don't have great consumer experiences, I mean, it's really hard to build any type of business whatsoever. You're somebody who's understood the behavior of consumers. You've really specialized in this for a long time, and now you're also thinking about how AI is going to change that, and a lot of the incoming trends, how they'll affect this world. And you've got a lot of interesting tips that you've learned from over the years in this space that I think are going to be really helpful for entrepreneurs to learn from. So I'm excited to have you here and to get into your story.
Yeah, hey, listen, delighted to be here. Let's get into it.
Awesome. So just kind of going back to the beginning, like what made you interested in CX specifically? Like what made you want to build a career around this category? How did you kind of get into it?
Yeah, I think I've always been fascinated by connection, right? For me, connection is everything. It's the essence of humanity. It's the essence of who we are. And so my journey to where I am now, I started like out of college, did the usual business degree and went into business. And I was also an actor at the same time. And so I was kind of half on stage. I'd like a foot, a foot in the entertainment industry, thought I'd maybe go down the acting route. A foot in the kind of running my own marketing agency and kind of torn. And so eventually I went down the marketing agency route, much to my annoyance and my missing Oscar. But the weird journey my life then took was where I ran that agency for like 15 years, and it was a kind of a standard research agency. But I got very tired of researching things because people don't necessarily tell you what they think. They tell you what they think is true, and they don't really. So looking at data and numbers, and I got more interested in the social science part as I went along. So I'm a social scientist. I'm a behavioral scientist. I'm fascinated by how people think, how we make decisions, behavioral economics, cyber behavioralism, anthropology, sociology. Those are my fields. I'm fascinated. And so I kind of became more and more interested in running the agency as to why people did what they did. And I became more and more curious about that. And curiosity is one of my core values personally. And so kind of the business side of it, running an agency, it was profitable, it was great, but it wasn't filling my soul. And so I stepped back on a stage at one point as a favor to a client to present some of the work we had done for them at a business conference. And of course, I hadn't been on stage for maybe 10 years at that stage. And I just felt that rush that you get from a live performance as an actor. And I realized that, the conference industry, the speaking industry, motivational speaking, there was a lot of great content, but not great performance. And so I kind of got allured into that area. And so now I'm a full-time motivational speaker. Yeah, that's what I do. CX is my space because I'm just fascinated by human connection, but I also do a lot on leadership, a lot on customer experience, employee experience, the future consumer. And so really to boil it all down, it's how we connect. Because the problem with your audience listening to this, no matter what your product is, it's a commodity product today. Somebody else can make it just as well. Somebody else can do it better. Particularly now, true as we head into AI and quantum computing, the tools are available to everybody. So whatever competitive advantage you may have had in terms of quality or time to market, they're getting shorter and shorter because everyone's got access to the same tools. And so the only thing that's left is that connection, the connection with the customer, the kind of tribal loyalty that people might have. And how you foster that connection is through a deep emotional understanding of what your customer is, who they are, what they need, predicting their needs. And so entrepreneurship is no longer about getting to market first or having the best product. It's actually the person with the best connection. That is the person that wins the race for relevance.
It's an interesting point, the best connection. What can you do to have the best connection? What can you do when thinking about how humans interact with your product to make it the most easy, most accessible, or even just the most attaching to them?
Yeah, I think the quick answer is you push past product because the product isn't. A lot of entrepreneurs and business people think that that's where it ends. You sold the product, you've got their money, and next, so you're focused on the transaction, and it's fundamentally wrong. You need to focus on the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you think about this from a dating perspective, right? So, if you focus on the transaction, the one night stand, fantastic, you'd have a great night. But if you have one night stand after one night stand after one night stand for 6 months, eventually it kind of you run out of road because there's no depth to it. And that's the same what we do in branding. And unfortunately, with brand loyalty programs, we actually do that. We entrap people into relationships. So buy 9 cups of coffee, get a 10th coffee free. That's not loyalty. That's entrapment. That's like going on a date and asking your date, does this hanky smell like chloroform to you? You're trying to like entrap them, keep them in your basement. Whereas for true brand relationships, what we're looking for is genuine emotive loyalty, a belonging, people that feel that they belong to the tribe. Like if you think of some brands like Harley Davidson, right? Everyone, right? They talk about hundreds of thousands of sales reps on the road every weekend because everyone driving a Harley is a sales rep for the brand. They tattoo it on their skin. And the same, I was on vacation with my teenage kids a couple of years ago, sat down at lunch, and this snowboarder, 25-year-old guy, sat down next to us, real X Games kind of dude. And he had a big Red Bull tattoo on his neck, like right across his neck here. And I thought, like, wow, he either really loves soft drinks or, why has he chosen like the most prominent place in his body to display a brand logo? And it's because Red Bull isn't a product to him. Red Bull is who he is. It's a tribal belonging. It's a mark. It's like when you deconstruct the word branding, it comes from that old branding, like physical branding of a slave or a cattle. And so, like, when we invite brands into our lives, what we're doing as customers is saying, I align my values with yours. So your purpose, your brand, why kind of aligns with who I am. And that's why I'll buy from you. And that's the future of entrepreneurship and branding and belonging. And so I have a book coming out in a couple of months called Tailor Making, based on Taylor Swift and her biggest tribal fandom that she has. She has one of the biggest collective community tribes that we have today. And so when you look at that Swiftie army, Pink and Lady Gaga and Rihanna and Beyonce, they're all great singers, but where's their tribe? They're not there because for 20 years, Taylor Swift has constructed a customer experience, customer connection, stepping into their lives, having them step into hers, tearing away the line between producer and consumer, always looking for authentic connection, vulnerability. And again, connection being her core. It's not about the music. It's about us. And she has that wonderful heart thingy she does. Me, you, that's the brand. And so she recognizes that she's only half of the equation. The other half comes from who the customer is. I think most business people really lose that. They get so product focused, so process focused. It's all about them, my brand. And even if you look at the social media content they push out, it's all about themselves. Here's what I'm selling. Look at me. Please look at me. And that Barbie movie that was out a couple of years ago, like the setup for that new Barbie movie was this existential crisis that poor Ken had, my namesake. I'm still upset that I didn't get an audition. Ryan Gosling stole my part. And so, the whole movie starts with Barbie's happy every day, but Ken's only happy if Barbie looks at him. This idea that Ken is nobody unless Barbie looks at him. And I think in modern branding, we're the Kens. Like, we're hysterical for attention. We want the customer to love us, but actually we need to be happy in our own why, our own purpose. And our social media content shouldn't just be about us. It should be about them. It should be about like much more peer-driven reality. And so if you're looking for success in the future, as Gen Alpha come of age, or Gen Z come of age as consumers, the biggest consumer force we've ever seen, they only want to interact with brands that have true authenticity, a true realness, a genuine feel, strong purpose, strong why, and they're right. Because up to now, it's just been like, look at me, I'm a shiny thing, buy me. And the next generation of consumers aren't really interested in that. They're interested in shareable experiential equity. They're interested in stories, in a realness that is very absent in some of the brands that we have today.
Yeah, can you just expand a bit more on that, Ken? Like, how else do you think Gen Z is just so different in what they're looking for? Because they are very different.
Yeah, I think so. They come in for a lot of flack, which is interesting. So, like in kind of corporate boardrooms, it's always a cast of the eyes up, it's a rolling of the eyes. It's the Gen Z, they want to be CEO tomorrow. And, from an employee management point of view, they're really hard to manage. But actually, I think they are asking the questions that the boomers, the millennials, and the Gen Xers forgot to ask in terms of connection. Like, what's in it for me? Why, so yeah, I'm happy to do the hours working wise, but what's my return? And I want to align myself with values. And so when I've used that quote earlier on, invite me into your life as a brand, that's what's happening. They're inviting you into their life. And so, like, as I travel the world, for instance, let's take casual dining. Let's take your Chili's, your Nando's, whatever. Slowly the fast food joints, the Burger Kings, the McDonald's, they're kind of really struggling because they don't really have a core why anymore. There's no real story. There's no one posts, I was in McDonald's earlier on their story. But street food movement is booming all over the world. And why is that? It's because people love authenticity. They love the idea that this guy gave up his job in PricewaterhouseCoopers, grew a beard, and now sells falafels out of a van. The realness, the escape, the rat race. So, like, if you think back to the 80s and early 90s, the kind of badge of honor was Wall Street, the braces, the shirt, the money, the Wolf of Wall Street, that kind of lifestyle. Gen Z, yeah, we all like money, but they're not going to sell their soul the way previous generations did. They really want brands that have a story, that have excitement, that, yes, make them look good. The core of humanity is still there. I want to self-project. I want to buy things that make me look good. But they really only want to interact with brands that really have some sense of strong identity themselves and that link. And so I think they will modern brands will struggle, and then the business channels that we've established just don't suit Gen Z anymore, because it is all about one click, one swipe. I mean, there's Amazon instant lockers on US campuses that deliver the product you want within 3 minutes of ordering. Within 3 minutes of ordering, it's in the locker ready for you to collect. So it just depends on how far you live on campus away from those lockers. And so we're breeding a generation of Veruca Salts, of, Willy Wonka, I want it now, daddy. And so I think the reality of that from a supply chain point of view, from a logistics point of view, is very real. And I think we used to get excited, let's say, as Gen X and millennials, with the kind of low level personalization that was going on. Whereas as AI comes of age, yeah, I expect you to not only know me, but I expect you to predict what I might need. You have all my data. And so this whole kind of privacy, personalization seesaw that was there for Gen X and millennials isn't there for Gen Z. They think, yeah, take my data, take all my data, but make sure when you take it that you then come at me with really predictive product and a deep understanding of my life stage and who I am and where I am and what I need, and then serve me up products and services that exactly meet or predict those needs. And that's perfect. That's a good use of my data. Take my data and just try and flog me things that you want to sell and I don't need. Not cool. So it is a very, very challenging thing for a boardroom to get their heads around, our business, because today we're trying to market to 7 different generations. You've got everything from the silent traditional generation over 80, all the way through to boomers, to Gen X, to millennials, to Gen Z, to Gen Alpha, and now Gen Beta at the end, just being born this year. So like as a product, when you go to market, you got to kind of look after all those people sometimes. Like there's some brands that are spread across all those generations. That is difficult because every 15 years, those value shifts change in terms of what they want from a brand. It's not easy.
What would you advise like companies that are building products now? Like should they just target a couple different of these generations? Should they just focus on one? And how do you kind of figure out who you want to target?
Yeah, I mean, that's marketing 101, isn't it? So always know your market. And a lot of brands, I mean, don't. A lot of brands want it all. We're all things to all people. You can't be all things to all people. And some brands, government services, education, healthcare, you have to try and serve everybody. But usually, I would say for a successful startup or a brand, know your market. Yeah, pick your market. And if you go after so there are some categories, like the luxury brands are really struggling at the moment. So some of the biggest brands in the world at the luxury fashion end and perfumes are struggling because they're aging consumer, literally, that kind of boomer, particularly boomer and Gen X consumer, is sometimes a dying force, literally. And the younger generations don't really see the worthiness of those luxury brands necessarily. They see them as kind of old, what they call granny brands. It was this perfume that my granny wore, the logos that my granddad wore. Not so cool. And so they're really trying to position hard for the next generation. That's their biggest challenge. But as they do that, they're alienating all of their current customers. And so it's a really hard tightrope to walk for them, as they're trying to say, well, look, we need to obviously change focus, change channels, change what the brand looks and feels like, and change what it's relevant to, because the next consumer doesn't find the old values relevant. So let's do that. But the moment they do that, they alienate the people who actually buy their brand. And that's a really brave thing to have to do, to kill your brand for 10 years, And so again, it comes back to just choosing your market well, and then going to market in a way that suits that generation, and using the technology that suits that generation, and talking to that generation, their language and all that kind of stuff. And so while you see all the memes and the jokes about, oh, here's how to talk to Gen Z in the workplace, and all this stupid language, that is a joke, but it's also kind of true in terms of just the basic marketing communication. How do you talk to one generation would obviously differ from how you talk to another generation. And so the marketing and marketing communication isn't a word I love, because communication kind of can just be a one-way thing sometimes. It's a conversation we need to have, a marketing conversation where the consumer feels they're part of the product. There's no line between producer and consumer. That's the utopia.
Have you seen some products recently that you're like, wow, like they really get it? Like they understand how to appeal to the new generation, but they've kind of found this balance?
I mean, to go back to my point on Taylor Swift earlier on, I think she actually is a brand, because in the music industry, she's done something quite interesting. She has longevity, and usually we don't see that in the music industry. We have a brand that goes away for a long time and comes back, fine. Your Madonna, your Bruce Springsteens that kind of fade away for 10, 15 years and then have a nostalgia rebirth. Whereas Taylor Swift is interesting. If you stand in her Eras Tour concert and look around, you see mothers with daughters. The mother was the fan, 12, 15, 16 years ago, and now their 5 and 6 and 10-year-old daughters are with them. It's really interesting because her successes commercially, if you look at the album sales, have never dipped. And it's a continuous reinvestment of connection. And so she understands how to connect. So in 2006, 7, 8, 9, when she was starting out, she used social media heavily to connect in a way that no brand had ever understood. She invented the idea of like what we would call today social media marketing, and we'd be very posh about it. She understood that from the very beginning. You can talk to your fans every day on Tumblr. You can invite them into your life. You can post on their threads, and oh wow! And in fact, her first album, one of the single release choices from it was done on her MySpace page by people voting on which track should be the next single. And that was the first time record executives discovered that you could use the peer economy. Like you can use the customers as a force to determine the direction of product. I was like, whoa. And this is coming off a 16-year-old girl who thought, I've got a great idea. And so she as a brand, I think, has been able to walk that walk on a continuous basis, continuously using technology in a new way, looking at the emergence of technology and being able to invite the customer into the process along the way. And I think brands that have invested in tech, particularly along the way, to get it. And there's discussions every day in every boardroom about how much money we should spend on the tech. But ultimately, and there's a lot of noise in AI and stuff. You know, we're at kind of version 1.5 at this point of AI, and it's going to get better and faster, and no one can keep up. But the whole point is the entrepreneurs that are investing in tech, the ones that invest with tech that makes you connect better with the customer, that makes the customer feel something, are the ones that are winning. The ones that are just kind of creating a noisy tech for nostalgia or for novelty, yeah, great. There's a place for novelty, but they're generally quite short-lived. So it's a case of how we can really look at a brand and think, right, well, what can we do here to make people feel connected in a way that matters to them? Because that to me is a litmus test. You know, if as a brand you have loyalty, but you think it's just transactional loyalty, then they can leave you. Whereas once you have a moat of loyalty, it's like a relationship. Once you have a moat of loyalty, you have depth. And I've stopped using the word customer experience. Even I now use the word customer intimacy, because intimacy is fostering a sense of closeness. Anyone can have an experience, but intimacy is something different. And so once you've got intimacy and depth in your brand connection, at that point, then it's very difficult for customers to leave you. And again, going back to the Swift thing, as an anthropologist, it's quite interesting if you start talking to Swifties, members of the tribe, and you start talking negatively about the product. And I'm sure you've had this experience, and everyone's had. If you start negatively to a Swiftie about Taylor Swift, and just watch what happens. It's really interesting, you know. It's like watching a hornet or a bee take their stinger out. Like they get very defensive, and that's just a really good marker of emotive belonging. These people emotionally belonged, and they call her mother. Yeah, it's like a cult, and so you know they belong to the point of avidly defending a brand, and you would get the same response if you queried a guy's Harley Davidson motorbike as well. You know, he would be very quick to tell you why the bike is the best in the world and why. And so this belonging that people have, fostering that isn't easy. You can't turn that on overnight. You have to genuinely believe in the connection and continuously look for ways to excite your customer, continuously look for ways to make them smile, go beyond their expectations, beyond product, beyond price, foster genuine relationships, stand for solid things in terms of why and purpose. And that's all the hard work, because the easy work is banging a product out and putting it on a channel and off you go. You know, the hard work is actually having your brand stand for something. And if you question as a listener, even if you're listening to this podcast, if you step back and think, right, what are the 4 brands in my life that I genuinely feel emotionally connected to? You'll struggle. You know, might be 2 or 3. And sometimes they can be fashion brands, sometimes they can be mobility brands. And then there are some brands that really want that space, like financial services and healthcare, but they don't even have it. And they think, well, hang on, we're in their lives every day. So as a banking brand, we should surely be a partner for their life. But most of us look at our banking brands and think, yeah, you're just there to transact and take my money, and I'll go somewhere else tomorrow if I could, but I'm just too lazy. That's not emotional loyalty. So any startup looking and listening to this, I think you start off with your why, who we are. Yes, product's important, but ultimately the connection is as important. That's your kind of barrier to exit.
Interesting. How do you see AI affecting this relationship that we have with our brands today? Do you think, I mean, it automates a lot of stuff, but I don't know if it understands the human touch yet. Like, do you think it can make this become more personal? It can help some of these brands get into that space that they want?
I think there's 2 really interesting things that are happening in AI, and they're opposites. On the first side of things, one of the biggest growths in AI is companion AI, and people having AI boyfriends and girlfriends and grief bots and all that kind of stuff. And that's really interesting, again, from a cyber behaviorist point of view. It's really interesting to watch the line, because we always had this human on one side, machine on the other side, and they never kind of met. And we would try and make the machines look a bit human to try and kind of make ourselves feel more comfortable with machines. And so you see all the humanoid robotics at the moment. But actually, what's happening, I read a study recently about CBT, particularly in therapy, where, you know, we have a huge loneliness epidemic, a huge depression epidemic, anxiety epidemic all over the world. We don't have enough mental health therapists. And so AI mental health, for some things, not all things, but for some simple things like anxiety, loneliness, depression, it can be quite if then. some of the therapy. And they've done a few tests with AI avatar, deepfake, beautiful human focused AI therapists. And they will listen, because a lot of therapy is about listening and asking the right question at the right time. And what they found was that humans, because we're weird and so irrational, even though you've paid to go to therapy and you're there because you know it's important to say everything, you still lie to your therapist, often unconsciously, but you don't, how many units of alcohol do you consume a week? Oh, about 3. And in your head, you're thinking, about 10. Because you didn't want to tell them that. And just multiply that out. That's an easy one, but multiply that out by your emotions, your feelings, and your innermost secrets. And people tend to lie to other humans. But interestingly, the report showed that when you introduce technology, people don't lie to a machine, because what's the point? The machine can't judge you. And so people are more honest in a weird way with AI therapy. And so we're watching the line between what is human and what is machine fade away. Because once I'm trusting a machine, an algorithm with my deepest fears and emotions, and then once I'm texting on a daily basis and interacting visually and with voicemails with an AI companion, the line between what is human and what is machine fades very fast. And that's a good thing for where we want to go, because actually it's less now about us and them. It's all one thing. The downside to AI in consumerism is that we're going to have AI agents, virtual AI agents, which are going to be your personal assistant, the best personal assistant you'd ever have. Think about it. So I'm looking at the stuff behind the scenes with Google and Microsoft, and it's about to hit us next year. And basically, it's like every consumer decision that you've ever had to make. We don't like making decisions as humans. It's annoying. If you go down to the shampoo aisle, there's 400 different types of shampoo. God, how's there 400 different types of shampoo? So you end up buying the same one all the time, because that makes it easy, because you buy the red bottle and that's fine. Whereas in the future, the AI agent will make all the decisions for you. What broadband server you're using, low level things like groceries, or where you're going on vacation. It knows you, and it'll get to know you so well over time that it'll predict your needs. And every time you want something, you just ask it. Now, unless you're calling for a specific brand, he will go off and find you the cheapest or the most convenient or the most easy deliverable product. And so in a way, the consumer is going to step out of the consumer decision-making process. So we've had B2B, we've had B2C. This is B2M, business to machine. How do you influence the machine? And in marketing, when Edward Bernays left Austria, he was Sigmund Freud's nephew, and he came to New York and he set up the first PR agency in the 40s, and that became the first ad agency. Mad Men, that's all based on that. He discovered that you could use his uncle's work about guilt and emotion and fear to sell. You didn't need to sell functionally. You could actually use the irrationality of the human mind and put a semi-clad woman on a motorbike, and you'd sell the motorbike faster than talking about the cylinders and the efficiency of the engine. And so for years in marketing, we've been doing that, and we do it on social media today. We use clever imagery, clever vocals to get people to swipe up and buy. Whereas when you take a human out of the consumer decision-making process, that fundamentally changes the nature of marketing forever. It's the biggest thing to happen in marketing ever. The consumer not being present for consumer decision-making. And that is both tremendously exciting in terms of where we'll go, and terrifying for every single marketing executive listening to this today.
So Ken, what do you want to do now? Just the last question I have, what are your aspirations in this space? What do you hope to accomplish?
I think for me, a lot of my work is human-centric. So I do keynotes all over the world on AI, but they're all human-centric. So I always try and connect people back to the humanity of what we're doing. So people get so excited about technology, and they end up doing things for the sake of technology, using novelty, and it's not the direction you want to go. So for me, all my work is around connecting people with purpose, connecting brands back to their consumers, and also even on my personal development side of work as a motivational speaker, connecting people with their own goals and desires. And so for me, if I lay out my values over a page, and if I look at who I am and why I am and what I am, the word connection comes up again and again and again. It's just connecting back to self, connecting back to your purpose, and then being really clear with the brands I work on in terms of pushing past product towards purpose. So we had that 4P model years ago in marketing, then we added another 5th P with people, and now I obviously always put in the purpose one. So really, unless you know why you're going to market and what you seek to achieve in this world, the next generation of consumers you're just another product. You're more noise in the marketplace. You're another swipe up on my screen. So again, it's looking to connect, looking to get past that place and invest in those connections on a regular basis with emotional intelligence, recruiting talent that has genuine emotional intelligence, getting away from IQ as the kind of decision maker for an interview, and looking to, well, who is this person? Does this person have high EQ? And can they actually, because in the CX space, it's all about emotional intelligence. It's not really about skills or IQ. We can teach anyone that. What you want to do is teach someone the depth of connection. And the more social scientists actually we can bring in, because the CX space is a lot of data scientists, a lot of rational people, not so much intelligence, emotionally and creative people. And we need to kind of tip that balance back towards the emotional.
Well, I definitely like your approach, Ken. I appreciate you taking the time and doing this. I think it's great that you focus a lot on understanding the human connection and the importance of that, and kind of how to use technology with that in mind. It's an area now that's just, I think sometimes it just gets overlooked, but it's so essential, and it's going to become even
Yeah.
more essential with automation as that continues to increase. So I look
Absolutely. I
forward
mean,
to, yeah,
economists even, and I'll leave you with this. Economists, that famous economist quote, the thing that gets scarcer becomes more valuable. It's one of the laws of economics. And in a way, human connection, as we head into that kind of Pixar, Wall-E type world where automation, humanoid robotics, AI, quantum computing takes over everything, every industry, then what it is to be human becomes actually scarcer. Human contact, human connection all becomes scarcer. And because those things become more valuable when they become scarcer, brands that invest in those things early on set themselves up for success in the future.